Welcome to EdTech Monday. I'm Julie Gishuru, and it's a pleasure to have you with us once again. On the show this week, we take a look at the top challenges that technology can address in education on the African continent. The COVID-19 pandemic has deepened the challenges in access to education and learning on the continent, but it has opened up opportunities in education and technology. Organizations like the Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT at the MasterCard Foundation catalyzed the EdTech system in efforts to improve learning outcomes in Africa. However, for the EdTech ecosystem to thrive, it needs to be demand-driven. And so this week on EdTech Monday, we ask, what are the top education challenges that technology can address in Africa? We have an outstanding panel. Professor Sarah Anyang Agbo, the Africa Union Commissioner for Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation. Professor Sarah Agbo is from Cameroon and was elected in 2017. She has over 20 years' experience in the field of academia. Albert Nsengiyumva, Executive Secretary for the Association of the Development of Education in Africa. ADEA was first established in 1988 as a framework for better coordination among development agencies, but has evolved into a pan-African institution built on partnerships between African ministries of education and training and their technical external partners. Dr. Bitange Ndemo, Professor of Entrepreneurship at the University of Nairobi. He's an ICT champion, an academician, and a columnist with Kenya's newspaper, The Daily Nation, and its sister publication, The Business Daily. A very warm welcome to all our panelists. Great to have you as we focus on the top challenges that education technology can address in Africa. And we want to make this conversation as real as possible, as connected to the issues and challenges in Africa as possible, because we're all learning that relevance is critical. And so let me start, Commissioner, with you and with your perspective. There's lots being said about EdTech, the importance of EdTech, the need for EdTech, how do we get it to the ground? But when you look at it, what do you see as the most critical issues EdTech must address? And what's the next step we need to take to be able to address those issues through education technology? Please.
Thank you very much for that question. The discussion on challenges of education is indeed an important subject, given the disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But while addressing the emerging challenges, we can't also lose sight of the entrenched challenges within the education systems that can also be addressed with technology. That is why EdTech becomes very important. So I think that the question of challenges which technology can address in education depends on how we define EdTech. And the application of EdTech should not necessarily mean adopting entirely new models of learning, but should support traditional classroom teaching and learning techniques with the view of making teachers more effective and getting students more engaged. So at the African Union, we place an emphasis on ICT in education through our continental strategy for Africa, the education strategy that we commonly refer to as Continental Education Strategy for Africa, with the view of technology as an enabler rather than a disruptor. So to say, we have supported our partner organizations such as JESKI to implement the African Digital Schools Initiative that train teachers on the use of ICT to improve lesson preparation and delivery. So this perspective towards EdTech enlarges the use case scenarios, especially in Africa, where digitalization is still at an early stage and gives more room for policymakers and practitioners to leverage the wide array of ICT tools for solving problems at various levels and scales. So these are some of the issues where we may need a different approach.
Bitanke, let me bring you in now. And Sarah, Commissioner Agbo has shared with us really the picture, the overview, the role of the African Union. And I want to just prod a little bit further into how we think about technology. And, without clarity on application and functionality, technology really cannot be an enabler. Also, we talk about being an enabler rather than disruptor, but sometimes you need to disrupt to enable. Being the principal secretary at a time when you really oversaw a lot of shifts in the country, in Kenya, in the application of technology for financial transactions and much more, maybe share with us, how should we be approaching this whole issue?
Thank you, Julie, for the question. And this is the most appropriate time to discuss technology because we have seen what it can do. Technology will disrupt, and it is disrupting education. This is because for many years we have been crying about budget. We don't have enough budget for textbooks. We don't have enough budget for training teachers. We don't have enough budget for everything. Digitalization or technology is changing that. Look at South Africa, where kids download textbooks and they are able to read. Some countries have refused to switch because of vested interest with respect to selling textbooks to students. So we are trying to solve a problem, yet there is other problems that are behind it. Then the most important one, which I think is when we talk about 30% of the people in the world have some kind of problem. This is either dyslexic or being hyperactive or being autistic. Technology is solving that by simply going through adaptive learning. You are able to give somebody a life that they would never have had. Because if you look at the previous years, those who went to school who had autism, they were discriminated. Technology is now helping us to bring those people to actually leave no one behind, as we have been promising about the children. There are several other things that technology can be used, but I think those three would be very key to give teachers education. If you are serious, I know people who have succeeded through online learning, self-learning, all kinds of things that we didn't have before, which are now available for everybody who wants to work hard by themselves.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us that there are those who struggle in, and to access the way, others do. And we need to think deeper, and we need to leave no one behind as we move forward with the use of technology in education. Is what are all those different needs, and how do we cover them and ensure they are covered and fully have full access to tools online. Let me come to you, Albert. And you have a great continental lens. You are speaking with education ministers, you are speaking with key stakeholders on the continent. What's emerging as absolutely critical in this ecosystem?
Without repeating what they have already said, what I wanted to say at this point is technology is actually a demand-driven tool. And this is where, as a continent, we need to put more emphasis. I just wanted to start telling you, when technology was initiated in most of our institutions 20, 30 years ago, the challenge at that point was more about infrastructure. We were concerned with access issues, connectivity, power, and so on and so forth. When you look at today, the issue is more about adopting technologies into our different sectors, including education. Now, if we all agree that technology is a demand-driven tool, as Demo was suggesting, let's make sure that we adopt it in education in the way that it helps to address some of our shortfalls, some of our challenges. And when we talk about education, we are talking about accessibility, we are talking about quality, we are talking about relevance. Can technology help to address those three important things as far as education is concerned? And so, back to your question, most of the policymakers, when they approach technology, indeed, this is what they are looking for. And especially during this time of COVID-19, when countries decided to close the schools as a protective measure, it was important to look for alternatives. But one could tell countries were not prepared to adopt technologies. So they were struggling. They were struggling to try and see how best they can cope with available technologies. So the key question is therefore, do we have capacity at the country level to identify those critical areas where technology, particularly in education, can actually support in terms of addressing the shortfalls of any issue that we are facing? So examples were given. Other example can be actually shared. I remember one of the programs that we are promoting right now is the use of mother tongue in many African countries. As an example, we have this global digital library that has tremendous number of books available. The question is, how do we make sure that those books that are most of the time in English can be translated into local languages to allow early learners to be able to improve their literacy level? And this one actually is now possible because just technology can allow that. We are able to translate those books using web tools, and children can then be able to read from whatever they are. This is a simple example of something that we can do using technology. Other examples are also available. So I just want to show you that the critical issues is our capacity to use technology and adopt it in the way that it supports to address particular issues that we are facing, particularly in education. Thank you. Great
points. Thank you. I'm going to come back to that question of capacity to use technology and adopt it because it's super critical. But Sarah, Commissioner, so when we're looking at the problems that technology can solve, the thematic areas we should be focusing on, what are you seeing as the African Union?
The first thing, like Adea just mentioned, is that Africa faces the challenge of sustaining access to universal basic education, and in most cases, subsidized secondary education while improving learning outcomes. So there is need to ensure access to quality by leveraging on technology, whereby the learners acquire relevant competencies and knowledge to prepare them for the rest of the education. When we had our specialized technical committee on education, science, and technology in 2019 in November, before the outbreak of COVID, the ministers of education decided that it was very important for us to bridge the digital divide and as well as invest in green energy. Because when you talk about remote learning, you talk about technology, these things cannot move without us having a stable power supply. So on the issues of access, education for persons living with disabilities and special needs remains a challenge as the current systems are not largely inclusive. Therefore, increasing opportunity for disadvantages and marginalized groups through technology is an area that education stakeholders in Africa need to prioritize. And it is therefore important for us as a continent to move together as one, holding on the same belief, because implementation takes place at the level of the member states. So the teaching of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics across all levels is critical to the development of a well-equipped human capital capable of competing in the 21st century. Creating the necessary engagement and excitement about these subjects requires practicality, which is not widely available. So this is why we need to urgently find technology solutions that enable learners to practice the applied aspects of learning at sustainable cost. And this is the importance of the African Union Innovation Education Expo, where we look for new means of teaching these very subjects in such a way that the kids can actually get used to it. Now, the expansion of TVET, the technical vocational educational training facilities, is costly. And the challenge for African governments is to prioritize this subsector as it is a key to the realization of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and the continental TVET strategy. Most often, the aspect of TVET is not worked on because they believe that it's for the low class. But that should not be the case. TVET should be prioritized because we're talking about employability. And of course, TVET speaks of skills and competencies because education with certificates that do not create jobs is not important. And that is where we need to consolidate on the continental TVET strategy. As the world enters the fourth industrial revolution, we need to also explore opportunities to modernize TVET through technology, and also opportunities should be created for training in IT skills for the growing industry. Then, furthermore, we often place a lot of focus on the delivery aspects of education technology, but it is also important to address the education data gap, which is prevalent in the African context. EdTech can be proposed to develop innovative EMIS solutions that are context-specific for Africa to enable visibility across the education delivery and management system. We should also explore how this is linked with labor market information systems to address relevance of skills that are provided at the tertiary and TVET levels. So these are the areas I would prioritize if I'm supposed to speak about education technology.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner. Bitanga, let me come back to you. And there's a couple of things that I just want to tap into. Capacity. We are on a continent with a hugely, the fastest growing youth population. We have so many innovative young minds, and we're talking about capacity gaps. We're talking about practicality, is not widely available is what we're saying. And yet all these young people are here, and I know they are willing, they are sharp, they are ready. So my bold question is, what do we need to do? Is this a total shift in approach of our curriculums to make sure that they are ready to come and fill these gaps very quickly, that they do find livelihoods here? What must we do?
Thank you for that question, Julie. What trends that we are seeing now, that most of the employment now is online, and Africans are getting to do that work. Reason why we have the most young people in the world. Our average age is around 19 compared to Europe, 50. The problems that we have is that we are not developing sufficient capacity locally. When we started talking about every country to begin to change competence-based curriculum, I think it's only Kenya that has done tremendously well in that space. And it has a chance to build capacity, ramp up capacity very quickly, and be able to take advantage of what we call population dividend. Why am I saying that? We usually talk about the problems, but we don't develop local content that is context specific. Even the content we are discussing now is the content that comes from outside there. We don't even develop simple content about our history. It is being written by somebody. So I see so many problems. There is a solution, but there is a problem that we are not taking advantage of these systems. We are not even solving issues of unemployment because we have the opportunity of excess labor in this part of the world. The young people that I help with, I do more with them on YouTube. Something that is being that should be done by the TVETs on how to do something. We go through the videos, create something, and go out into the market. This was supposed to be the role of the TVETs, as Madam Ambassador is talking about. We took TVETs as places for failures. And nobody wants to be seen in a place of failures. So we actually need to change the narrative and say places of opportunity, places where you can get jobs, so that we can get these young people trooping into the TVETs and begin to do the work which cannot be done in other parts of the world because of the population dynamics.
Thank you for that. I think, we are starting just to see a shift in perspective towards TVET. And the honest truth is, if young people find opportunity and jobs through TVET, they will not go searching for degrees and they will not look for other ways, right? So once TVET starts to work, young people will come and others will come as well. So I think, more work here, Albert, clearly for all of us. But I just want to come back to this, this youth dividend that we have, this population dividend Africa has, which is so unique to us, and how you are approaching the whole issue of leveraging technology to really give this high potential group opportunities at work, at dignified work.
Thank you, Julie. I'm actually going to build from what Professor Sarah and Demo have already said, which I think is very critical. First, I think from what they say, we are coming from a very bad perspective and particularly a bad perception, because we are tackling on the issue of TVET. In our language, we are actually saying technical vocational skills development. Because when you use TVET, you are only looking at the one that is given the school-based training. We believe in the African context, bearing in mind the huge number of youth that need skills, we need to make TVET flexible. And Demo gave a good example. Today with technology, there's so much that you can do. You don't need necessarily to be sitting in a classroom. You can actually, any single place can be turned into a training space. One of the things that we are promoting is even what we call workplace learning. We are actually promoting learning into enterprises as well, like the Germans or other Asian countries have done. Now, back to your question, it is important that we equip our young people with technology know-how skills. We just need to expose them. I think you mentioned it. You can't imagine innovation taking place right now. I think Professor Sarah was alluding to one of the initiatives by the African Union, this innovation competition. This is how we need to go. We need to make our young people competitive. And they have the right skill. They can compete globally. It is just a matter of changing the mindset. I think from the beginning, most of we as a parents were thinking that for young people to tell that they have been to school, they have to graduate from universities. And now the market is telling different stories. We actually need more people with practical skills as opposed to academic. That's how we can address really the issue of equipping these young people. And technology can allow that. Let me give you a simple example. There's this initiative, No Mandela. This is an idea that came from an American gentleman who's coming to Africa. He's right now in Kenya, he's in Nigeria, he's in Rwanda, he's in South Africa. Gets these young people exposed to coding. And they are working for any companies globally. And this is what Andrew was talking about. With technology today, you don't necessarily need to be sitting in a workplace. You can be sitting in Nairobi and work for a company in Japan. So I think the world has become so small based on technology. Let's make sure that we equip our young people with the required skills and we expose them. They can make a big difference in this case. So those are really kind of policies that we need to push forward. We need to move away from the traditional education behavior in a more flexible, adapting to the labor market needs. Because the world is now globalized, it is digitalized. Unless countries are able to adapt, we are making a big issue. And this will take some time for us to be able to address the issue of unemployment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Time has passed really fast. We're nearly coming to the close. And my focus now really is on the key stakeholders that we need seated at the table and the action that we need for them to really translate into the change that we want to see. So I'd like each of you to just think for a moment, who are the stakeholders who you would like to send a direct message to when it comes to, use of education technology in Africa to really deal with our top challenges on the continent, to solve those challenges? So who are some of those stakeholders? I'm going to mix it up a little bit now and say, Albert, let me start with you.
So policymakers need to take the lead. They need to make sure that they actually initiate what we call public-private policy dialogue. And this is something that is happening in a number of countries. So that's really number one. The policymaker needs to take the lead, followed by the private sector. Because when we talk about demand, the demand is from the private sector. And I noticed again, some of the countries have initiated this kind of exercise, making sure that the private sector play their role. They cannot just be sitting waiting for skilled people to engage. They need also to contribute and make sure that training are actually tailored towards addressing their needs. So that's really number two. And of course, as we move into regionalization, as we come up with this new Africa free trade markets, indeed, this is where the African Union becomes so critical. We also need to make sure that there are standards that are established between countries so that a young graduate from Nairobi can move to Lusaka, can move to Douala and be able to get a job. So that's mobility. And I know there's something that is going on under the African Union in terms of harmonizing qualification framework. So that's also very important. This will definitely go along the way to address capacities around the continent, because this is not an issue for a single country. It's a continental issue. So working together to address this is going to be so important. And of course, lastly, parents need to play a role. Again, as I said, parents always feel like for their kids to stay, they have been to school, they have to go to university, they have to have PhD. I don't think this is really the right thing to do. I think we need to sensitize parents to understand, unless their kids are able to get the required skills as per the labor market, we're not going to change the situation. So those are, to me, some of the stakeholders that I feel are so important. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner, let me come to you next. Who do you want to speak to?
Thank you very much. It's like Excellency Albert took it from my mouth. The first person is the policymakers. Once the political will has a vision of sustainable economic development, definitely they will push all their actions through. So the policymakers and the political will are very essential, because with what we've seen with COVID, we have established a new equilibrium for education delivery and management, and therefore we need favorable policy decisions and regulations that support the use of technology in education. So then the second people are the private sector and industry. There must be a synergy, because the challenge that we are facing now calls for public-private partnerships to deliver new learning opportunities at reasonable price points to governments and parents. So we need the support of the private sector and the industry to assist us. Again, we also need the support of stakeholders who have the same interest with what we have, like ADEA, like UNICEF, like ASEFA, like Save the Children, etc. So we need to come together. And for example, let's take an example. How can we partner with telecom companies to reduce the cost of data to students? The silver lining is that we have an opportunity to build from the start in Africa and develop systems that can deliver on the promise of education, leveraging on technology. And we should also document the best practices and share experiences across the continent to increase our effectiveness despite the unprecedented challenges we are faced with in the education sector. My brother was saying that we should use localized available sources to push in. It therefore means we need to understand what we have within Africa itself, and then we contextualize it, using the technology that we're talking about. So the other thing is that to share experiences across the continent to increase our effectiveness between the government, between the academia, between the private sector, industries, etc., so that we can all face the unprecedented challenges we are faced with in the education sector. Last but not the least is putting in place incentives at the continental, regional, and national levels for innovations in education. The African Union's Innovation Education that I mentioned program, established in 2018, identifies, promotes, and facilitates joint pilot projects between innovators and ministries of education to create key references. So I'll be referring myself to the ministers of education. What do they do with their budget? How are they effecting plan? Who are they synergizing with? Who are they calling to help them assist in implementing? We should stop talking the talk, and then we should walk the talk and go beyond rhetorics. Working between the government, the policymakers, the private sectors, the stakeholders of education is feasible and enables innovators gain experience in working with government, but also provides a pathway for them to gain credibility with investors. We need money. Where do they get the money? They will ask for collateral. Who gives them collateral? So there is need for us to work with other agencies, private sector industries that can assist in international financing also to help them achieve the different sectors that we need to work with. So I will end with a call to policymakers to embrace the opportunities in online learning to increase access to education at all costs and to synergize with the private sector as well as stakeholders in education technology to assist us give birth practical innovations that could actually help in changing the status quo that we have. That is the new paradigm shift that we should be thinking of. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Bitange Ndemo, who do you want to speak to and what do you want to say to them?
I want to speak to you, to speak to Professor, to speak to Albert, because for more than 50 years of independence in Africa, we've been saying government has not done this, government needs policy, government whatever. If you look at the COVID-19, which in my view was a blessing in disguise, that nobody, not government, that passed a policy that we should begin to innovate around COVID-19. People came up with ways of protecting themselves. That's how we need to act now. That let us begin ourselves, begin to do things. Of course, yes, what Ambassador says, that you need the triple helix. You need government, you need academia, you need private sector. But more important, it's us who generate that demand, that we can go as a group to government and say, we need to lower the cost of broadband so that the kids can afford to access education. We can now come together and invest in solar energy. Look at what has happened in Kenya on solar. People went invested in energy to the extent that the power company is saying we are going to die if this is happening. They have been pushed to begin to think that people need the energy. So we need to act ourselves from inside. We are the one to develop local content, to provide what we call natural, we process our vernacular into the languages that we've been using to learn into our vernacular. So it's not that government should give us a policy on use of natural language processing. We should actually go ahead with it. It is media which needs to now provide news in such a way that I can understand it in my vernacular. So everybody should be working towards changing Africa, because we have blamed government too long and we are not seeing results by blaming the government. They are just used to it. Let us blame one another and say, Albert, what have you done? And then they can say, well, I've been helping young people through this platform to be able to do something, to be able to get jobs online, to be able to do. That way we can make a lot of change.
Wow, basically, Dr. Ndemo, what you have told us is that we are the ones that we are looking for. And I will just reiterate, as the MasterCard Foundation, we are in it with you as all partners trying to figure out the pathway forward. Finally, as we close just literally in 30 seconds, we are reminded by Dr. Ndemo's comments that this is really about us, mindset change, mindset shift, responsibility, stepping up, everybody playing a role. Will we do it? And can we get where we need to be? Albert.
I do agree that we need to articulate our own initiatives, working together. I think that's a very important point, so that we can actually be able to engage government. Just to answer, I'm optimistic. Indeed, we have taken so much time to be where we are today, but it's a sense that I'm seeing happening on the continent. I'm seeing, particularly confident with this young generation that has been given the opportunity to get exposed and also to innovate. I think Professor Sarah was alluding to innovation. So we definitely need to come in and continue supporting these young people, giving them the tools that they need in order to continue innovating. And this is where I come to the idea of Ndemo. Indeed, these young people, when they can show their contribution, it makes it easy for a policymaker to see the difference and therefore to act accordingly. So there's going to be a need for much push to make sure that these young people get exposed, to make sure that they are able to get the tools, to facilitate access to finance, because I still believe the continent can only change, not because the government wanted it, but because the private sector, is playing its part, so that we can give opportunity to as many young people as possible, and therefore advance in social and economic development. So I think this is the way to go. Of course, all partners will be needed for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Commissioner, from your perspective, can we step up? Will we? Will we get there?
Yes. Yes, we will get there, and we can step up. Like they said, ownership. We speak about Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. And we have aspirations, we have goals, we have priorities, and we have set up a map out through the blueprint of dividing the 50 years program into 5 phases of 10 years. And in each 10 years, we have things that we need to achieve. Now, those things have been spelled out by experts in the various fields. Yes, we can achieve it. Yes, we can do it. We can own our own initiatives, and we can provide African solutions for African challenges. It's very important. But the way we own it, and the way we implement, and the way we achieve is to have a paradigm shift. Not just speaking the words, but walking the talk, acting. And to act is to bring in the various stakeholders and game changers that can assist us in achieving these dreams. Yes, we can do it. This is one way forward. EdTech, having this conversation with us, bringing in different speakers to come and speak from different arenas. But the important thing is that as we speak together now, we realize that we have the same desire, the same vision. Why don't we network? Why don't we synergize? Why don't we link? Why don't we dot our I's and T's on this? And why don't we begin the plan of implementation consciously and deliberately? We can do it. We can change the narrative, because if Africa does not take that change and implement it, our demographic dividend, that is the asset that we have, this youthful bulge will be continuously unemployed, and the deaths in the Sahara will be taking place, the deaths in the Mediterranean will be taking place. So what do? Change our curriculum according to what the Continental Education Strategy for Africa speaks of. Build on ICTs, build on STEM, build on lifelong learning, recalibrate education, reskill, upskill. We can do it. Reskilling, upskilling, all this can be done. And it only takes the will. And that is why I said at the beginning, once the political will has a vision of sustainable development, change will come to Africa. And I believe change is already in Africa with this conversation that we are having. Yes, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to see the optimism. Dr. Ndemo, you have the final word. Can we do it?
I I have a lot of fear because some countries are now using artificial intelligence to control the minds of others, to control which products we buy, until I see that local content developed in Africa improves beyond 5%, we would be in serious danger. Because, as I said, all the social media platforms have artificial intelligence. They know what you need. They know when you need it. They know how you need it. They know which content to supply you. Africa is only contributing less than 5% of the content. We must begin to pull up our socks. That's the only way we can be able to have a chance. Otherwise, the technologies have gone so way ahead. We are now finding it easier to go online and use Khan Academy, to go online and use Coursera, to go online and use other platforms. So until we begin to develop our own content, we will be left behind.
Thank you. Thank you for that warning. Thank you for expressing your fear. It is so important, even as we embrace optimism and look forward with hope, that we do not ignore the realities. That is a conversation we must come back to. Dr. Ndemo, thank you for that. As we are entranced by content that is not developed in Africa, what is the trance focusing us on? What are we looking to buy? What are we consuming? Where does our cultural knowledge, our languages, and much more, our products, where do they play into this? This is something we can come back to in the future. Very big thank you to all our panelists. We had posed this very question to our audiences on social media. Let's take a look at their feedback. We can keep the conversation going on social media as well, so share your thoughts there. The platform is Young Africa Works on Facebook. Thank you for joining EdTech Monday Regional Edition right here on CNBC Africa. We look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a great month.